The hook. The young man had always dreamed of living on a space station. It was the kind of dream that children spoke about while staring at the stars. Now it was finally real. He had been accepted into a small research program and was given a shared apartment far away from Earth. The idea of sharing a room with an alien both excited him and scared him. When he arrived, his new roommate was already there. The alien was tall, with long arms and dark, scaled skin that shimmered faintly under the lights. His eyes were large and golden, unblinking, watching every movement like a hawk. He introduced himself with a short name that was hard to pronounce, so the human simply called him Rin. Rin did not seem unfriendly, but he was quiet, distant, and always busy with strange tasks. The first few days went by peacefully. The human studied, worked, and tried to get used to the new gravity system. He ate packaged food, listened to music from Earth, and sometimes asked Rin questions. But Rin always answered with very short words. If the human asked where he came from, Rin would only say far. If he asked about his people, Rin would change the subject. There was always a wall of silence between them. It was strange, but the human thought maybe that was just Rin's way. Then one evening, something unusual happened. The human came back from the research lab tired and ready to sleep. But as soon as he stepped inside, he felt something in the air. It was heavy, like the whole room was holding its breath. The lights flickered slightly, though no power failure was reported. Rin was standing near the door of his own room, his golden eyes brighter than ever. He looked tense, his body stiff, and his voice sharp when he spoke. "You must stay in your room tonight," Rin said firmly. The human laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. But Rin's expression did not change. His eyes glowed faintly, and there was a strange sound in his throat like a growl. He repeated, "Stay inside. No matter what you hear, do not open your door." Before the human could even answer, Rin turned and pressed his long hand against the control panel. The door of the human's small bedroom slid shut and locked automatically. The human rushed to the door and pulled at it, but it would not open. "What are you doing?" he shouted. Rin's muffled voice came through the metal wall, calm but cold. "This is for your safety. You must trust me." The human's heart raced. Why would his roommate lock him in? Was there danger outside? Was something wrong with the station? He pressed his ear to the door, but all he could hear was the faint hum of energy and the steady sound of his own breathing. The silence stretched on, making his nerves sharper with every passing minute. Then came the first noise. It was low, like the deep growl of some animal hidden in the shadows. It rose slowly, vibrating through the floor and into his bones. The human froze, listening with wide eyes. The sound came from Rin's room. A second noise followed, a scratching, sharp and steady, like claws dragging across metal. The human stepped back from the door, his skin crawling. He remembered that once, Rin had said something strange. He had warned him, in a quiet voice, "My season is near." The human had laughed at the time, not understanding what it meant. Now those words echoed in his mind like a dark riddle. Season? What season? And why did it sound dangerous enough to lock him away? His small room felt like a prison. There was nowhere to go, only four walls and a small bed. He sat on the edge, staring at the door. Every minute seemed longer than the last. Outside, the scratching grew louder, joined by a strange hum. The air felt warmer, and the lights in his room flickered again. It was as if the whole apartment was alive, breathing along with the alien. The human whispered to himself, "What are you doing out there, Rin?" He pressed his ear against the cold wall again. For a moment, he thought he heard voices, low, broken, alien words that he could not understand. Then came a sudden bang against the wall, making him jump back. It was followed by silence. Then another growl, this one sharper, filled with hunger. His heart pounded, his body shaking. He wanted to call someone, but who would believe him? He tried the control panel again, but the lock stayed red. Rin had sealed it completely. Fear and curiosity fought inside him. He knew he should stay put, as he was told. But another part of him wanted to know what was happening. What kind of season could turn a roommate into something so dangerous? He sat in the dim light, eyes on the locked door. Every sound in the apartment made him flinch. Every breath he took seemed louder than it should. The silence pressed on his chest. He was trapped, and the night was only just beginning. First signs of danger. The human sat in silence, his back pressed against the locked door. He told himself it was only for one night, but his nerves refused to calm down. The strange sound from Rin's room had stopped for a moment, and that silence was even worse than the growls. It felt like the quiet before a storm. Then, the lights flickered again, this time sharper, leaving the room dark for 2 seconds before they came back on. In that short darkness, the human swore he heard something move across the hallway, quick and heavy. When the lights returned, the sound was gone, but the air felt thicker, almost electric. It was as if the walls themselves were charged with invisible energy. A low hum started, soft at first, like the thrum of a machine running far away. But slowly it grew deeper, stronger, vibrating through the floor. The human put his hand down on the metal surface and felt it tremble under his palm. The hum was not from the station's engines. He had lived there long enough to know that sound. This was different, alive, unnatural. Curiosity pushed him closer to the wall that separated his room from Rin's. He leaned in, ear pressed to the cold surface. At first, he heard nothing but the faint hum. Then came a rhythm like breathing, but it was not normal breathing. It was heavy, uneven, like something struggling to hold itself back. Each inhale scraped like claws against stone, and each exhale shook like thunder. The human's heart pounded harder. He wanted to knock and shout Rin's name, to demand answers. But the memory of Rin's warning, "Do not open your door," echoed in his head. So he bit his lip and stayed quiet, even as fear clawed at his chest. Suddenly, his room grew warmer. Not just a little warm, hot, as if someone had turned on a heater he did not own. Sweat formed on his forehead, dripping down his temple. He looked at the vent above his bed, and to his shock, it was glowing faintly with the same golden light he had seen in Rin's eyes. Something was spreading through the vents, something that did not belong. The human covered his mouth with his hand, unsure if it was even safe to breathe. The air smelled sharp, metallic, almost sweet. Every breath made his head feel light, dizzy, as if the room itself was pulling him into a dream. He stumbled back, shaking his head to stay awake. "What is happening to me?" he whispered to himself, voice trembling. A sudden sound jolted him awake. The scratching had returned, louder this time, not only from Rin's room, but from the ceiling, from the walls, as if claws were everywhere at once. He spun around, his eyes wide, trying to find where it was coming from. The metal groaned and bent, as if something inside was pushing to break through. It felt like being trapped inside the belly of a beast. Then came a voice, not clear, not human, but a distorted whisper that seeped through the walls. It wasn't English, but somehow the human felt its meaning in his bones. Hunger, longing, need. The sound crawled under his skin, making his heart race until he could barely breathe. He stumbled to the bed and sat down hard, gripping the edge with shaking hands. His mind screamed at him to do something, anything, bang on the door, call the station's guards, break a vent open. But his body was frozen, trapped between fear and fascination. Because deep inside, a question kept burning. If Rin had locked him away for protection, what in the universe was Rin fighting against inside that room? The hum grew into a roar, a deep, vibrating wave that rattled every piece of metal. The lights exploded in brightness, flooding the room with blinding white. And then silence, complete silence, so thick it felt like sound itself had been stolen. The human's ears rang, his eyes wide in the glow. He could hear only his heartbeat thundering. Then, slowly, from the other side of the door, came a single sound that froze him in place. A voice, Rin's voice, but deeper, rougher, filled with something wild. It spoke just 2 words, in a tone that was both a warning and a threat. "Do not move." Curiosity and temptation. The human sat frozen after hearing those words. "Do not move." The voice was Rin's, but it was also not his. It was deeper, heavier, carrying a tone that felt less like a request and more like a command of nature itself. His chest rose and fell quickly, every breath louder than he wanted it to be. He stayed still for as long as he could, gripping the edge of his bed until his knuckles turned white. But human curiosity is a stubborn thing. Even when fear says run, curiosity whispers stay. And soon the whisper grew louder. The scratching had stopped. The glow from the vents dimmed. Silence stretched across the room, wrapping him in uncertainty. Was it over, or was something worse about to begin? He pressed his ear against the door again, his heart hammering so loudly he feared Rin would hear it. At first, there was nothing. Then, a faint sound like liquid boiling. A low hiss followed, as though steam was leaking through cracks in reality itself. The air grew warmer again, carrying that strange metallic sweetness that made his head swim. He tried to pull back, but his curiosity anchored him to the door. Finally, he lowered himself, crouching near the floor. His eyes found a small gap beneath the door, barely wide enough for light to pass. And light was passing, flickers of orange and red, dancing as if fire lived on the other side. He pressed his cheek close, trying to see more. What he saw made his breath catch. The alien shadow stretched across the floor, long and distorted. Its shape was not the same as Rin's usual tall frame. It bent and twisted, with arms too long and a back hunched like something carrying invisible weight. The shadow shifted suddenly, and a flash of skin came into view. It wasn't dark and scaled anymore. It pulsed with glowing patterns, like rivers of fire running beneath a thin surface. The human's heart slammed against his ribs. He should have pulled away, shut his eyes, stayed safe in ignorance. But he leaned closer, eyes wide, desperate for more. That's when a golden eye, brighter than the sun, snapped toward the gap. The human gasped and fell back, heart in his throat. He knew Rin had seen him, even without looking fully. A second later, the door shook violently as a hand slammed against it. The sound rattled his bones. Then Rin's voice, furious and ragged, erupted through the metal. "Stay out if you want to survive." The words were half roar, half plea. The human felt the weight of them sink into his chest like stone. He scrambled back to the bed, chest heaving. Every instinct screamed at him to listen, to stay away. But temptation gnawed at him. Why did Rin hide this? What was happening to him during this so-called season? The questions burned hotter than his fear. His curiosity was no longer just interest. It was obsession. The scratching returned, louder, faster. This time it wasn't from the walls or the ceiling. It came from the door itself, claws dragging across metal. Sparks lit the edges, tiny bursts of fire like lightning trapped in steel. The human clamped his hands over his ears, but the sound drilled into his skull. And through it all, a single thought repeated in his mind. If Rin is locking me away to protect me, then what exactly does he become when the season takes over? The glow from the vents flared once more, casting long shadows across the room. And in those shadows, the human thought he saw movement that didn't belong to him. Shapes bending, stretching, whispering. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, but the visions only grew stronger. The strange air filling his lungs was changing him too. He could feel it, his heartbeat no longer his own, his thoughts no longer safe. Curiosity had opened the door inside his mind. And now something was stepping through. Locked in and paranoia, the human sat on his bed, shaking. The sound of Rin's claws on the door still echoed in his ears. He had wanted answers, but now answers felt like knives. He told himself to stay calm, to breathe slowly, but his body refused. Every muscle in him was ready to run, even though there was nowhere to go. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. It was heavy, thick, as if the room itself was listening to his fear. The glow from the vents pulsed softly, like a heartbeat, sometimes slow, sometimes fast, as though it was matching his own. The thought made him shiver. He He tried to distract himself, to think of Earth, the sound of rain, the smell of old books, the feeling of open air, but the walls refused to let him escape. They hummed faintly, carrying whispers he could not understand. Alien words, broken and sharp, filling the edges of his mind. Were they real, or only his imagination? He could no longer tell. His eyes darted around the room, searching for danger. Every shadow seemed to stretch when he wasn't looking. The corner of the ceiling darkened, as though something crouched there. But when he blinked, it was gone. He rubbed his face with trembling hands, whispering, "It's not real, it's not real." Yet a deeper voice inside him answered, "What if it is?" The floor shuddered suddenly, a short, violent shake. His bed rattled against the wall. The lights flickered again. He stumbled to his feet, clutching the control panel by the door. Red light, locked tight, no escape. He hit the panel again and again, desperate, but it didn't even blink. It was like the door was mocking him. Then came a knock. A slow, deliberate knock, 3 times against the metal door. Not claws this time, not scratching, but knuckles. Human knuckles, steady and calm. His heart skipped, his breath caught. Was it Rin or someone else? The idea of someone else was even worse. He pressed his ear against the door, trembling. "Rin," he whispered, his voice barely audible. No answer, only silence. Then another knock, faster this time, harder. The sound traveled down the door into his bones. His legs nearly gave out under the weight of his own terror. The human stumbled back, eyes locked on the door. Something inside him screamed to hide. So he crawled under the bed, pressing himself tight against the cold floor. Dust clung to his skin, but he didn't move. He held his breath as the knocks grew into pounding. The entire door shook violently, but still it held. The pounding stopped, silence fell. That silence was worse than the noise. He covered his mouth with his hand to muffle his own breathing. Then, faintly, came a sound from behind him. Not the door, not the vents. Behind him, inside his own small room. He froze, every hair on his neck rising. Slowly, painfully, he turned his head. The glow from the vent above his bed flickered. And for a second, just a second, he saw something crawl across the ceiling. Thin, long, with too many joints. It moved like liquid shadow, gone before his eyes could focus. He pressed himself harder against the floor, teeth clenched, eyes wide. His thoughts spiraled into chaos. Maybe he was hallucinating from the strange air. Maybe the season wasn't just changing Rin, it was changing him too. The paranoia dug deep into his chest, twisting reality. Was he hearing real sounds or only echoes in his mind? Was he still safe in his room, or had the danger already slipped inside? He squeezed his eyes shut, whispering to himself again and again. It's not real, it's not real, it's not real. But when he opened them, the vent was still glowing, and the shadows still moved like they were alive. Trapped in a locked room with no escape, the human realized the worst danger might not be Rin at all. The worst danger might be his own mind, breaking apart piece by piece. And the night was far from over. The revelation. The pounding stopped. The glow from the vents faded, leaving the room in heavy shadows. For the first time in hours, silence filled the space. The human lay under the bed, holding his breath, waiting for the next sound. But nothing came. He crawled out slowly, his hands shaking. His body ached from the cramped space, sweat dripping down his face. The room felt cooler now, calmer, almost safe. For a moment, he let himself believe it was over. Maybe the worst had passed. Maybe Rin had fought through whatever storm had taken hold of him. Then, the lock on the door clicked. A soft sound, but it made his heart race. The door slid open, and golden light spilled across the floor. The human stumbled back, shielding his eyes. Rin stood in the doorway. But this was not the same Rin he had met when he first moved in. His body glowed with shifting colors under his skin, flowing like rivers of fire and lightning. His eyes were wider, burning brighter, almost too bright to look at. His voice, when he spoke, carried a strange echo, as though 2 beings spoke at once. "You should not have looked. he said, his tone heavy. The human's throat felt dry, words stuck inside him. What's happening to you? He finally managed to whisper. Rin stepped forward, and the floor vibrated under his weight. His glow painted the walls in gold and red. I warned you, Rin said. The season is here, and I cannot stop it. The human backed away until his shoulders hit the cold wall. Season. The word finally clicked inside his mind. Not a season of weather, not something harmless. This was something primal, something ancient in Rin's blood. Mating season. Rin's chest heaved as though he was holding something back with every breath. He gritted his teeth, claws digging into the wall beside him, leaving deep marks in the metal. My kind, we lose ourselves, Rin growled, his voice shaking with both anger and pain. We change, we hunger, we destroy. I lock you in to keep you alive. The human stared, caught between fear and pity. Rin's body looked powerful, dangerous, but his eyes carried a flicker of desperation, a plea buried beneath the rage. You're fighting it, aren't you? The human said softly. For a moment, Rin's glow dimmed, his breathing slowed. Yes, he hissed, but I did not know how long I can. The silence that followed was sharp. The human's heartbeat filled the space between them. He wanted to run, but where could he go? The door was open now, but the hallway outside seemed darker than his prison cell. And even worse, he wasn't sure if leaving would put him in more danger. Then the hum returned, low and deep. Not from the station, not from the vents. It came from Rin's chest. His body trembled as if two forces were tearing him apart. He dropped to his knees, clawing at the floor, sparks flying as metal scraped against his hands. Go, Rin growled, his voice warping between human-like speech and alien snarls. Run while I still know your name. The human's eyes widened, his body frozen. The glow in Rin's veins pulsed brighter, the air thick with heat and pressure. It was like standing in the center of a storm, one that could break loose at any second. Rin lifted his head, eyes blazing gold, and for the first time, the human understood. This wasn't just transformation, it was survival, instinct, desire, all colliding at once. And Rin was losing. The revelation struck harder than fear. The alien hadn't locked him in to hide some secret. He had done it because he cared, because he wanted to keep the human alive. And now that cage had opened. There was no safety left. Clash of instincts and trust. Rin's body shook as though something inside was trying to break free. The glow in his skin pulsed faster, brighter, until it was hard to look at him. The human pressed his back against the wall, his breath shallow. He could see the struggle written all over Rin's face. It was the look of someone fighting a war inside his own blood. Then it happened. Rin's claws tore across the floor, sparks bursting like fire. His head snapped toward the human, eyes blazing with hunger. The air grew hotter, pressing down like a heavy weight. And with a roar that shook the walls, Rin lunged. The human barely moved in time. He dove to the side as Rin's claws slammed into the wall where his head had been. Metal screamed, leaving deep scars on the surface. The human scrambled across the floor, his heart racing. Rin, stop! It's me! He shouted, voice breaking. But Rin was not listening. His chest rose and fell like a beast, every breath a growl. His golden eyes locked onto the human like prey. Another roar tore from his throat as he swung again. The human ducked under the strike, stumbling over the bed. Fear flooded his body, but so did something else, anger. You locked me in to protect me, didn't you? He yelled. You still know me. Don't let this season control you. For a moment, just a moment, Rin froze. His claws hovered inches from the human's face, trembling. His eyes flickered, golden fire dimming into something softer. Recognition. The human's chest heaved as he spoke again, his voice quieter. You're my roommate, my friend. You don't want to hurt me. Rin's body shook violently, his claws digging into the floor. His jaw clenched as if the words themselves were chains pulling him back. Yes, Rin growled, the sound torn between rage and sorrow. Yes, but I'm losing myself. The human stepped closer, even though fear screamed at him to run. He reached out his hand, trembling but steady. Then fight it, he whispered. For a second, Rin leaned into the words. The glow dimmed, the growl softened. It seemed possible. Hope flickered like a small light in the storm. But the season was stronger. Rin's body snapped forward, instincts taking control again. His claws slashed, grazing the human's arm. Blood rushed down his skin, hot and sharp. Pain jolted him, but he refused to step back. Instead, he shouted, Rin, this isn't you. The alien roared in frustration, slamming his fists into the floor. The room shook, cracks spiderwebbing through the metal. He crouched low, his breathing ragged, torn between two worlds. One voice inside him demanded hunger, instinct survival. The other voice, small but alive, wanted to protect. The human's eyes burned with fear, but also determination. He held his bleeding arm against his chest and stood tall. If you lose yourself, then I'll remind you who you are, he said firmly. Rin's gaze snapped up, wild, trembling. And for the first time, the alien hesitated, frozen in place. The clash was no longer just physical. It was a battle of willpower, trust against instinct. The human refused to run, refused to hide. And Rin, trapped in the storm of his own nature, had to choose which voice to obey. The room was silent except for their heavy breathing. The human stood bleeding, his arm burning with pain. Rin crouched low, his body glowing like a living storm. Neither moved, trapped in a fragile balance. One step could decide life or death. Then, slowly, Rin's claws lowered. His chest heaved, his glow dimmed. The wildfire in his eyes flickered, replaced with something close to regret. You should not be here, he whispered, his voice rough. I cannot hold this forever. The human nodded, sweat dripping down his face. I know, he said softly, but I'm not leaving you alone. For the first time that night, the silence felt almost calm. The storm seemed to ease. The human allowed himself to breathe, to hope. Maybe the worst had passed. Maybe they had survived the season together. Then came a sound, a knock on the front door, sharp and heavy. Both of them froze, eyes snapping toward the hallway. The knock came again, louder this time, and then a voice, deep and alien, seeped through the metal walls. We smelled the season, the voice growled. Open the door. The human's stomach dropped, fear flooding back stronger than ever. There wasn't just one alien fighting instinct tonight. There were more. Rin's eyes widened, his glow flaring back to life. No, he whispered, shaking his head. They found us. The knocking turned into pounding. Metal shook, dust rained from the ceiling. Another voice joined the first, hungry and wild. Let us in, it demanded. The sound of claws scraped against the outer door, sharper, faster, desperate. The human staggered back, his chest tight with terror. He looked at Rin, who now stood trembling between rage and despair. What do we do? The human asked, his voice cracking. Rin's glowing eyes locked onto him, desperate and fierce. You survive, Rin said, his tone sharp, no matter what happens to me. The pounding grew louder, the door bending under the force. Sparks flew from the control panel as claws tore into the metal. Voices layered over each other, snarling, demanding, calling for blood. The human's heart raced, every nerve on fire. He pressed against the wall as Rin stepped forward, his body blazing with light. The alien turned his head just once, looking back at the human. His voice was low, almost a whisper. Now you really aren't ready for this. The outer door screeched, bending under the pressure. A crack split across the metal, golden light spilling through. And then darkness.